We are, thankfully, just a few weeks from the end of 2020. And I think it's fair to say that pretty much everyone can agree that this year hasn't gone as they hoped it would. One of the hopes, though, that we had for this year was that autonomous vehicles would become more of a commonplace thing. Tesla had originally planned to have full self-driving out of beta and available to the general public. Autonomous vehicle taxi services were supposed to have taken off in major metropolitan areas around the world. And depending on whom you talked to, even autonomous flying taxis were supposed to be around, with paying customers on board. Yet here we are, a fortnight from the end of this year, and very little of that has come to pass. Sure, Tesla has made truly awesome leaps in the competency of its full self-driving functionality in autopilot, but right now it is still in beta. And Alphabet-owned Waymo, formerly Google's self-driving program, has similarly pushed its own boundaries forwards, getting to a point where it's actually accepting members of the public into its test fleet in Phoenix, Arizona. Countless others, including pretty much every major automaker, not to mention scads of Silicon Valley startups, have invested billions of dollars into self-driving programs over the last few years, all of whom, at some point or another, were aiming for 2020 through to around 2023 as a major watershed moment for self-driving vehicles. I mean, just today, Amazon-backed Zeus, one of the latest startups to enter into the fray, revealed an impressive box-shaped autonomous vehicle that frankly reminds me of a little private train carriage on 4 wheels. It's got 2 bench seats facing each other across a single door. And it has a 133 kilowatt-hour battery pack, and the company claims can drive for up to 16 hours between charges. It's pretty impressive, but it doesn't change where we are today. At the end of a year where autonomous vehicles suffered many setbacks, and some companies like Daimler announced it was even ending its own autonomous car program in preference to other areas of research and development. So what went wrong? It wasn't just COVID. Why has 2020 been a disappointment when it comes to fully autonomous vehicles? Well, in a nutshell, I think it boils down to a handful of reasons. The impossible promises that have been made of such systems by their respective creators, which is in turn caused by a lack of realism in setting expectations, just how hard it is to actually make a competent self-driving system, that insane signal-to-noise ratio that exists in the self-driving vehicle world, which is akin to a massive investor bubble where everyone and their dog wants a piece of the action, and a lack of homogeneity between the ways each system is developed and works. And finally, of course, legislation. And this is all typified by the representations of autonomous vehicles on YouTube. In preparing for this video, I spent some significant time over the weekend watching everything from polished corporate videos from self-driving companies through to real-world Tesla Autopilot and Waymo passenger vehicles. And I even looked at the amazingly diverse DIY community that's built up around such systems like AI. Independently, all of these videos show self-driving cars are coming. They are, in some ways, already here. Some of those videos impress, some make you feel excited, but others scare, and some make you nervously want to reach for the brake pedal. Together, they represent a raw state of self-driving as it stands at the end of 2020. We have a group of systems which appear amazingly competent in many cases, but which, in the wrong hands, unsupervised, could set back the cause of self-driving vehicles for decades. And the reason we're here? I'm going to get to that now. At the top of the list, of course, is the impossible promises that have been made by autonomous vehicle companies and automakers, as well as the media, in recent years. These promises are often hyper-optimistic and give a very rosy view of what a company can deliver. That in of itself is not unique to the autonomous vehicle world, though. It's present in the wider car world and in the tech industry too. And it's often used by companies eager to keep investors excited and supportive. After all, if you can impress those holding the purse strings and show them just enough to exemplify decent progress, you're more likely to stay afloat. I mean, that's basic startup 101. But in the case of self-driving cars, it's also the perfect storm. A belief that the act of driving can be easily broken down into a series of problems that can ultimately be solved. Those impressions are picked up by the general public and by news organisations eager to report on the next big thing to get folks buzzing. And yes, we've done that too. The reality of self-driving is different. Making self-driving cars is easier than it's ever been before, but making competent self-driving cars? Well, that's akin to finding a cure for cancer. The basic acceleration, stopping and steering of an autonomous vehicle is pretty simple. In a world of electric vehicles where pretty much everything is drive-by-wire, the mechanics of controlling the basic driver interfaces can be as simple in some cases as plugging into the car's onboard diagnostic port. I know that I am oversimplifying this, but that's been the starting point for many autonomous vehicle programs in the past. These days, because of impressive computer power, getting your computer to read the road ahead, be it using cameras, LiDAR, radar, or some other combination sensor system, combining that with the information the car has on board, from a hyper-detailed 3D GPS-assisted mapping system, or in the case of Tesla and some other companies, swarmed data from other cars that have already travelled that route, and then making appropriate decisions as to what to do next? With today's computers, that's reasonably easy. For 99% of all driving, we now see competent systems being offered that place themselves into an uncanny valley of driver competency where, if you were unable to tell someone wasn't at the wheel of the vehicle, you could probably convince yourself a human was driving. In fact, in those situations, especially when it comes to emergency avoidance maneuvers, self-driving systems like Tesla's autopilots, Waymo's fleets, and yes, even good old pre-emergency collision braking systems can react far more quickly than we can. You only have to search on YouTube to see this in action. Time and time again, there is incredible documentary evidence of semi-autonomous driver assistance systems reacting blisteringly quickly to a dangerous situation, either avoiding a collision completely or taking enough mitigation steps that dramatically lessen its severity. And the data backs this up. Safety systems that are built from semi-autonomous driver assistance systems are making the roads a lot safer. There are fewer accidents, for example, when a Tesla autopilot system is enabled than when it isn't. But while these systems are now so competent that they can handle a large proportion of driving duties, there are still glitches and problems. If you'll allow me, it's a little like the world of speech recognition. Apple first showcased speech recognition in the early 90s with its Casper speech recognition assistant. That became a standard part of Apple's operating system, and by the time that Mac OS 9 came around, you could even use your voice to lock or unlock your computer. I loved it. It was great. It was fun. It was a gimmick. And it was also unreliable and terrible. Fast forward to today and you have Siri, which is so much further advanced than its ancient ancestor and gets better all the time, but still to this day struggles with basic things that we humans don't, like homophones, for example. Even now, speech recognition isn't 100%, and we still use keyboards and mice and touchscreens and gestures to interact with our computers and smartphones because it's easier, faster, and more convenient to do so. So what does this have to do with autonomous driving? Well, we're kind of in that situation now. Nearly a decade ago, when Waymo, then Google Self-Driving, showcased the autonomous Prius that it had acquired through the purchase of a company called 510 Systems, we were all in awe. Autonomous driving was something that you saw in the DARPA challenge and maybe on TV in science fiction. But then everyone started doing it, and today we are many, many generations removed from that original vehicle that was showcased. Just like speech recognition, we've got to a usable system that is mainly okay. But the massive cache of videos I watched this weekend, I saw plenty of competent driving for autonomous systems, but I also saw a Waymo taxi wait for minutes to merge out of its pickup space in a supermarket parking lot. I saw Teslas misinterpret a T-junction because of a car parked across the road from it. And I saw video after video of self-driving cars hesitant to merge and ultimately ended up in the wrong lane because they couldn't interpret the things that we humans can interpret instinctively in the batting of an eye. Namely, a quick glance to see if the person behind was letting us in. to see if that pedestrian crossing the road made eye contact, to see if the driver behind was looking to overtake us, or to see if the driver merging across from us knew we were there. This kind of contextual awareness is super hard to teach cars, and similarly, it's super hard to get people not to expect it from other road users. So we find ourselves in an uncanny valley where people aren't ready to drive alongside autonomous vehicles, and autonomous vehicles aren't truly capable of interpreting these non-verbal essential clues from other road users. I'm going to come back to this all in a second when I discuss legislation, so let's now turn our attention to the problem of noise. In an investor bubble where everyone is trying to beat everyone else to market and investors are very eager to part with their cash, we're seeing a very high signal-to-noise ratio. It's made worse when companies portray work in progress as being near production, and frankly, we only have to spend time at something like CES to see that in action. Companies who make a lot of noise about their products will ultimately get noticed, but that doesn't always mean that their products are ready or that they have the tech to back their products' claims up. They might have prototypes. They may even have successful lab testing functioning as they wished. But the reality is always less, and any media test drive or demonstrations are carefully controlled to minimize the risks. And something will go wrong after all. And negative press is not good, and it all ties back to the first point, making wild, overly optimistic claims and ignoring the engineering challenges that lie ahead. The last 2 points I want to make, homogeneity and legislation, go hand in hand. Every autonomous vehicle system is different enough to its competitor that there's no real standard way of operating yet. Sure, there are various methods that are beginning to coerce to form a standard autonomous driving workflow or even a standard sensor system, but there's still enough diversity that every company is mostly working in its own bubble with its tier 1 part suppliers. And when that happens, there's very little collaborative problem solving. But that collaborative problem solving could help tackle some of the issues we see in autonomous vehicles today. It could help fund focus on development for hardware designed to help computer systems better see and react to those non-verbal cues, whether that be visual sensors designed to look for eye contact of other road users or something completely brand new that no one's thought of yet. It is, by the way, why Nissan and other automakers have included visual light bars in their autonomous vehicle concepts and prototypes in the past. That's all designed to help with those non-verbal communications. And by the way, if you think that I'm wrong about non-verbals being an essential piece of driving interpretation, ask yourself this. Is it easier to drive on a clear day when you can see the faces of other drivers, or is it easier to drive at night in heavy rain when all you can see are headlights and the dark outlines of other vehicles on the road? Without legislation aiding and providing a cogent framework for autonomous vehicles to operate in, it is very difficult to get that last 1% solution right. Tech companies and automakers are essentially right now brute forcing a solution. The resulting cars are incredibly impressive. They are incredibly safe, far safer than anything that we humans drive. But they're also operating in a world that's dominated by and engineered for human drivers. Without legislation, they will have to continue to brute force their solutions, and we'll continue to see lots of videos like the ones I mentioned earlier with hesitant self-driving systems. Good all but that last 1%, which leaves us with 3 potential outcomes. Either development continues as it has, and we see more and more edge case scenarios dealt with, which could take another decade or more, like speech recognition, or we see legislation lay out frameworks for new vehicles, detailing what human-driven vehicles need to do around autonomous vehicles. Or we see an ultimate ban of human drivers. That would make it a lot easier. After all, every video I've seen involving an autonomous system getting confused or misbehaving has usually been down to a failure to interpret a human's intentions, or maybe struggling with other non-predictable things like shadows from trees, wildlife, or extreme weather. I am pretty sure that last thing won't happen. And frankly, I hope it doesn't, because I love to drive, and I love to ride motorbikes, but without the second, the first will take a lot longer to achieve, regardless of how awesome the systems are. And until we reach that point, well, we're stuck here in autonomous driving Neverland. Come back in 2025, or maybe even 2030. And I haven't even touched in this video on one of the other big problems with autonomous vehicles today. Us lazy humans not using them as their manufacturers intended them to be used. But that's for another video entirely. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks go to our $50 a month patrons, that's John Lyons, Regine Fellows, Jeffrey Songster and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. That's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Sean Ueda, Will Graylin, and Ian. If you'd like to join these amazing Patreon supporters and become one yourself, you can follow the links below, and you'll also find links to send us a donation through either Ko-fi or Bitcoin if you'd prefer. There's also a free link to our Discord server, so sign up and come and join in the chat. And if you fancy some swag, do check out our Redbubble store. We have some great swag, and in the new year, when everything has calmed down, we'll have some more great stuff for you too. After the names have finished scrolling, you will see a suggestion for a new video to watch from this channel, so please do consider watching it if you haven't, and I will be back very soon. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!